So nice to see everybody come to have a listen about this most important topic. What we're going to be doing is we'll start with a guided meditation, just to kind of clear our minds and make it so it's conducive to both speaking and hearing about this important wisdom. So it's just a very simple guided meditation. It'll take us about 10 or 12 minutes or so. Very easy. Part of the meditation is connected to mantra meditation. So this, let me just turn that down a little bit more while I'm talking. There we go. So we'll be doing some breath awareness, a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of mindfulness, and then we'll all come to a part where we harmonize our breathing, and we're going to add mantra to the breath. So mantra, this Sanskrit term, mantra means spiritual sound, a yoga mantra. So mantra, man, means the mind, and tra means to draw away. So meditation on mantra helps to draw our mind away from all of our problems and worries and concerns. It helps to remove the stress and anxiety and fears from the mind and brings us to a nice state of peacefulness. So we'll be saying the mantra audibly together. So before we start, what I thought we'd do is go through and give you the mantra that we'll be using in this meditation. So the mantra is Gauranga. Now I recognize some familiar faces here, so you know this mantra, but some people I don't know. So if you can repeat this mantra after me, so when we come to that part of the meditation, it'll be very easy to move into it. The mantra has 4 syllables. So if you can just repeat. First syllable is Gaur. Ra. Ang. Ga. Gaur. Ra. Ang. Ga. We put these 4 syllables together in one breath. So we inhale, so inhale together. Gaura. Wow, very beautiful. So the idea is just to immerse ourselves, immerse our consciousness in this beautiful sound. And this will help everything, actually, in our life. So I think we'll start. There may be other people coming, but they can just come in and sit at the back. How you doing, guys? Okay, it's as simple as that. So just get comfortable. If you like to, you can close your eyes just to, people may be moving around and coming into the room, etc. So by having our eyes closed, it can help remove that distraction. So let's just spend a few moments just tuning in to this meditation music that's there, just leaving aside everything else and being present in this moment, in this space. Now coming to simple breath awareness. We're not trying to breathe in a special deep way, just feeling the sensation of each inward breath, feeling the sensation of each outward breath. Feeling this breath has been like a gentle wave. It's lapping on the shore of a lake. And this rhythm of each breath is helping to bring us to a state of relaxation. Just having the focus on this rhythm of the breath, the feeling of relaxation which the breath is bringing to our body. As we now move on to our mindfulness practice, and we begin very simply with awareness that we are the silent witness of each breath. So you can mentally say to yourself, I am aware I am inhaling. I am aware I am exhaling. Now, in the same way that we are becoming aware that we are the observer of each breath, we are also the observer of the thoughts which move through the mind. So we're simply watching, just as if you are sitting peacefully on the bank of a stream, just observing the flow of the stream before you. Similarly, the flow of thoughts do not touch us or sweep us away, for we are not our thoughts. We are not our feelings or worries or fears. We are not the mind. We are the self, or the silent witness of this stream of thoughts. You can mentally repeat this meditation after me. I am the silent witness. I make no effort to think, but thoughts come automatically. I am watching the thoughts flow through my mind. I am aloof from them. I am the silent witness of my mind's activities. So now in a moment we'll be harmonizing our breathing and starting on the third outward breath. We meditate with the mantra Gora Anga, immersing our consciousness in this transcendental sound. Let us inhale together, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. Nice deep inhalation. One more time. And now we're going to come out of our meditation. If you like to open your eyes, if you want to stretch, if you can, just to wake the body up a little bit. Maybe if it's doing a little bit of a spinal twist, if you like. There we go. All right, thank you very much. That was 3 hours. You probably did. So it's my great pleasure to have this opportunity to share with you this wisdom of yoga. So there's a couple of things I'd like to say just at the beginning to set the scene a little bit. I'm not here to convert anybody. I'm not here to argue with anyone. It's simply trying to present this information that I have received, this yoga wisdom through my spiritual teachers, and to share with you for you to consider. So this is the process of yoga, is to hear these ideas and to consider them. We don't want to be either a blind skeptic who goes, it's all bullshit, nobody knows, it's all just made up, is a blind skeptic. Such a person can never learn anything because they're immediately shut off to new ideas. Nor do you want to be a blind follower. Oh yeah, I just love everything you said. I just believe it all. What did I say? I don't know, but I believe it. It's just, you're a nice guy, We want to be open enough to hear new ideas which may be counter to ideas which I may already hold. But I also want to be aware enough to question. So this balance of being open enough to consider ideas which may not be what I accept at this particular point in my journey, but also to be careful enough, skeptical enough to ask questions. Is that okay? So again, if there's things which I say which you don't like, I apologize. But like I said, the truth can actually be amazing and challenging. So I'm hoping that it will be both. Some things which are challenging, because it is through challenging that we grow. In the same way as if we do some exercise or go to the gym and we're doing we have 1 kilo weights. And every time we go to do the gym and do 1 kilo weights, it's like, yep, I got this is easy. But if you add a bit more weight to that, then it means your muscles will grow and you become healthier by that increased challenge. Is that understandable? So similarly, in our journey through life, in our journey to the truth, to understand the purpose and meaning to our life, then to be challenged is a good thing because it helps us to grow. So I'll be presenting certain ideas for your consideration. These are not my ideas. Not one of these ideas is my idea. My, meaning Radha Krishna Das. I have heard from my spiritual teachers. And this wisdom in the yoga system has been handed down through an unbroken chain of what is known as Guru Parampara. So in other words, what I'm presenting is not my own ideas. I've heard this from my teachers, and it is knowledge which is contained within the sacred yoga texts. And my teacher heard from his teacher, and his teacher heard from his teacher, etc., etc. So in this way, this knowledge has been handed down. So it is my desire to pass this on, not to add anything to it, nor to change it or remove the ideas. So if we can, because my opinion on these ideas is of no more value than your opinion. No more value. Our opinions are equal. But what I'm trying to say is I'm not passing on my opinion. I'm simply a messenger who is passing on the message that's been given to me. And in the same way that when I heard it, I didn't simply blindly accept it, nor did I blindly reject it. I considered it and then applied spiritual practices and considered it, etc., etc. So what I'd like to do actually, I want to read something to set the scene, because this captures what I'd like to say, in the best way. So I'll start by reading this, just a few paragraphs, and if you can listen and consider it, and then we'll move on to the actual ideas of reincarnation, suffering, karma, etc. from there. So please listen and consider what I'll be presenting here. I, the eternal self, or atma, part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, my natural condition is being happy. I am in a situation where I am suffering. This world is a world of suffering. We have physical pain and diseases, endless anxieties, fear, confusion, loneliness, financial problems, death of loved ones, broken love affairs, etc. Why am I in this situation where I am suffering? To understand the answer to this question, we will be looking at the yoga viewpoint on the subject of reincarnation, or what is known also as transmigration of the self. It is knowledge or wisdom handed down through an unbroken line of self-realized yoga masters and the sacred yoga spiritual texts. This talk is not just a philosophy or a theory lecture. This is actually about you, your life. It has to do with the reality of our lives and our condition. We are not simply speaking to have people have some mental knowledge, but the yoga spiritual masters, out of actual compassion, want to liberate people from their suffering condition. So I want to impress upon you that understanding the science of reincarnation. Try to listen with your heart and mind and absorb what you understand in your own life. The process of learning about yoga is a process of hearing from an authentic, bona fide source. So in yoga, you actually hear and read the same teachings over and over again throughout your life, over a period of years. And whatever parts that are relevant to your spiritual development at the present time will enter into your heart and mind in a deep way. Whatever applies to your life at your present time, you will absorb and retain. And that which doesn't really apply to you at this point, you won't hold on to. So it's a matter of absorbing while you are listening, and then you can contemplate upon that which you remember after the lecture is over and practice your meditation along with this contemplation. This is the yoga learning process. So again, it's not accepting or rejecting. It's considering, contemplating upon these ideas. In the yoga sacred text, it is said that the human form of life really begins when a person asks the question, why am I suffering? That is where the inquiry into the absolute begins. Why am I suffering? Yogis have analysed the objective reality of our condition. The objective reality is that no matter what we try to do in regards to yoga asanas or pranayama or anything else, the fact is that each of us and every one of us is suffering. According to yoga, the living entities, the atma, the people in this world, are all stuck on this endless wheel of birth and death. The goal of yoga is to be liberated from this wheel of birth and death by returning to one's original spiritual nature, which is yoga, or union with the divine, with the Supreme Soul. This process of liberation requires that a person understands the nature of his entanglement. This means it is necessary for a person to understand the process of reincarnation. Why does a person reincarnate? Why is a person stuck on this wheel of birth and death, forced to take on one body after another? A person who is serious about achieving the goal of yoga needs to understand the yoga viewpoint of reincarnation in order to know how to liberate themselves from this wheel of birth and death. So that's the goal of what we are presenting today, is to understand this process of why. First of all, understanding who we are, which is how we will begin our exploration of the idea of reincarnation, because it's impossible to understand the reality of reincarnation until we understand ourselves, who we are, to understand who is reincarnating. Because even if we look at the word, the English word reincarnation, I'm sure there's many educated people here, more educated than myself, who knows what the word re means? Re means again, right? And carnation is not a flower. In this connection, nor is it a type of evaporated milk. It springs from the root word carnal. Carnal means flesh and blood, a material body. That's what carnal means. So reincarnation means that a person is in a physical form, a physical body. They leave that physical body and they enter into another physical body. So reincarnation actually doesn't mean different lives. We don't have different lives. We are life itself, and we are residing in different vehicles, so to speak, or different bodies. So anyway, we'll get into all of this. Now, part of what we promoted and what this talk was going to be about is also how to overcome all suffering. Now, I have a whole section of this to explain the different sufferings that we go through in life to make it very clear in case people are not convinced. Sometimes people accuse us of being very pessimistic when we talk about suffering. And actually people have to be convinced that there is suffering and that we will have to find a solution. Oh, that's so negative, you're so pessimistic. So should I go through I could speak about this topic for probably 3 days and not exhaust the reality of the nature that the living beings are suffering in this world. So I won't go for that long. I'll try and keep it quite brief. But first of all, I'll read a couple of verses from the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a famous yogic sacred text, and in this text, Sri Krishna is speaking. And Krishna says, "From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery where repeated birth and death take place." That's very direct. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest are places of misery where repeated birth and death take place. And from another yogic text called the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, it says, "For one who has taken his birth," actually this is from the Bhagavad Gita, and then there's more. "For one who has taken his birth, death is certain. And for one who has died, birth is certain. O great hero, one who takes his birth is sure to die, for death is born with the body. One may die today or after hundreds of years, but death is sure for every living entity." So what is death? This is one of the things we'll be looking at today. Now, whether we like to admit to it or not, everybody has some fear of death because we're not sure what it is and what happens afterwards. So we'll be addressing these things today also. And at least beginning the process of removing the fear of death. So the goal of yoga, and when I use the word yoga, I'm not just talking about yoga asanas. We're talking about the perfection, the ultimate goal of yoga, which means the union, our union with the divine, with the Supreme Soul. Self-realization or enlightenment is the goal of yoga. So the yoga path, the yoga lifestyle, the yoga teachings and practices is to help the individual achieve a life of purpose and meaning, of joy, of happiness, and to also experience a fearless death. This is actually what the yoga practices and teachings is offering anyone who wants to take advantage of it. A joyful, happy life, full of purpose and meaning, and a fearless death. Because as we have read, and some of us actually understand, death is built into the body at birth. There is no escape. Rich, poor, black, white, whatever suburb you're born in, whatever country, these will happen. So, do I need to talk about suffering? A little bit. Anyone here not convinced this world is a place of suffering? Who thinks, it's great here? I remember there was a gentleman who used to come to our meditations years ago, and he ended up stopping coming. He said, because you're so negative. He said, there are just, this world, where we are here on the world is just a pocket of paradise. A pocket of paradise. Well, of course, a number of things come up from that idea, and one is, of course, they're not thinking about anybody else but themselves. I'm okay, Jack, I think, isn't that a saying? I'm all right, Jack. Where we don't actually worry about the well-being of others, so it's a very stunted view to have of life when we're simply focused upon, I'm all right, Jack, who cares about anyone else? That's one thing. But the reality is, there are many different sources that bring misery and anxiety and fear into our lives. I'll touch on them briefly because it's important. Otherwise, unless we actually embrace and understand, recognize this reality, there'll be no, or, why bother to overcome the wheel of samsara, or the wheel of repeated birth and death. Like we may go on detours here, is that all right? Different as we go through the thing. It is my understanding that originally reincarnation was a central doctrine of Christian teaching. For around about 350 to 400 years after the time of Christ, for that whole 300 or 400 years, reincarnation or transmigration of the soul was a central doctrine of Christianity. Now that can be backed up by like actual facts, but the reason I bring it up now is because it's also understood that the reason why that idea was removed from the Christian doctrine was because many people had this erroneous idea that this world is, God created this world for us to enjoy. So, if we simply have birth after birth, means, well, why bother about my spiritual life now? Why be concerned about engaging in spiritual practice now? I can just enjoy myself in life, and then in my next life, I'll be concerned about spiritual life. So people were putting off their spiritual life because of this erroneous idea that this world is a world of enjoyment. It's there for us to enjoy, and if reincarnation is real, well, then it doesn't really matter whether I engage seriously in my spiritual life or not this time around. So some people are under the illusion that this world is actually a place for us to enjoy. So I'd like to debunk that myth, if that's okay, with some evidence. Where to start? There's so many places we could start, it's hard to know where to start. Well, let's start with some very obvious things which most of us will go through. There are 4 things which we all will experience in life which cause great suffering, in fact misery. Birth. Birth is actually suffering, both for the person giving birth to the baby and for the person being born. Being locked up in this tiny little room for 9 months. No wonder they're kicking. Just for a moment, consider the reality. The living being, the person, is in this small space, and they have very little room to move. Particularly as the body grows more and more, it becomes even more cramped. So for 9 months, there is already suffering. And it's described in the yoga text that the person, of course, their body is very soft and tender in that early stage. And they're being bitten by worms and things that are there. And, when the mother has acid attacks and indigestion and things, these are all burning the skin. The stomach acids and different things are there, been burning the skin of this person stuck in the womb. Now, just imagine, there are many things we could speak about, but just think right now, are these chairs reasonably comfortable? I mean, not the most comfortable, are they? But they're better than sitting on hard wooden chairs, right? So they're reasonably comfortable. Okay, now as I, look around the room, I see within quite 5-10 minutes, people are starting to, right? Because it's uncomfortable. The body causes discomfort to us. But we've got to move it and kind of, try and ease some of the pain, right? So now imagine sitting in that chair for 9 months. Don't worry, you'll be fed. You'll be watered. But you have to go to the toilet where you're sitting. You can't get up and go to the bathroom. How much suffering do you think, even just sitting here for the 3 hours or so we're going to be here, will cause you a certain amount of pain and misery. So now birth, experience of being born, is also suffering for the living being, who, as we read in the beginning, is by nature is happy, joyful, blissful. That's the nature of the soul. And then, of course, they come out, and then things like teeth start coming out. It's cutting your teeth, isn't it? And we've got to find, and they're crying, right? Those who have had babies, or those who have been a baby. Then as the teeth cut through the gum, it's very painful. That's why they cry. And then, of course, things go on from there. They're lying in their own shit, and they're trying, because they can't speak yet properly, they're crying, and the person's going, look at this toy, and they're trying to go, right? so they can't, so there's all those kind of fun things as well. And it gets even worse. They force you to go to school for like 30 years or so. Anyway, so there's birth, then there's diseases. Nobody escapes disease. We cure one and a new one pops up like the Hydra. Then if you make it through the birth and the diseases and you're lucky enough to reach old age, then that's also a fun time. Old age of the body is just a laugh at every moment. And then, of course, there's death. So here, right, without even going too in depth, birth, disease, old age, death. So it's described in the yoga text. There are three primary causes of anxiety and misery for the living being in this world. One is the miseries caused by our own body and mind. Indigestion, toothache, migraines, cancer, on and on. Miseries caused by one's own body. Arthritis. Do I need to go on? And perhaps even worse is miseries caused by one's own mind. The worries, the fears, the anxieties, mental health issues. You know, there's a saying that the mind can make a hell out of heaven, or a heaven out of hell. So miseries are caused by our own bodies and our own minds. Rich, poor, no discrimination. Misery is caused by other living beings. From mosquitoes, not only just the bites, they carry all kind of interesting things that connects up with the diseases. You know, all these different kind of Ross River fevers and probably what other things do they carry? Lots of things. Malaria, all kind of things, right? So other living beings doesn't just mean that snakes, crocodiles, or in my case, the greatest fear of other living beings is cane toads. I'm not sure why. I'd rather pick up a cane toad or a crocodile than, a snake or a crocodile rather than a cane toad. So for me, it's something from a past life maybe. Other living beings means other people on the roads who cut me off, who I cut off and want to rage at me. Parents are a cause of great misery to children. Children are a cause of great distress to their parents. I remember even when I turned 60, my mum's like 90, and she's still worrying about me at 60. Children are a source of great stress and anxiety for their parents. And then, of course, there's partners, husbands, wives, right? All kind of people at work. And then, of course, other people, other living beings cause us broken hearts. Well, isn't that fun? You know, I tell people I'm an ex-boxer. You know, in my early life I was a boxer. So, you know, broken noses, broken fingers, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Painful. What a crazy sport, right, you may think. But I thought it was great. So pain, physical pain, I've experienced it. There's nothing comes close to a broken heart. Nothing is even close to that. Now, the broken heart might be they leave me to go and love someone else. That's always fun. You know, they may go, oh, it's not you, it's me. Oh, yeah, thanks. That makes it much less painful because you've said that. But then, of course, the other pain is when the death of a loved one, when someone leaves me, permanently, so to speak. So other living beings are the source of misery for us. And then there is natural forces, too much rain, too much heat, floods, bushfires, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, etc., etc. Get the picture? Do I need to elaborate on any of them? I mean, can we accept this reality? So to actually overcome this suffering, and as we said earlier, we are not actually human yet until we ask the questions, who am I? Why am I here? What the hell is this 80 years all about? Why am I suffering? That's what distinguishes us from the living beings in other forms of life, that inquire, that ability to inquire. So obviously, we're all humans here today because we are actually at least have an interest in this idea. And as we also said, to understand, the predicament that we are in, the entanglement, we need to understand how it works so that we can actually, is the word disentangle us, unentangle ourselves from this situation. In what in yoga is called the wheel of samsara. Samsara means this wheel of repeated birth, diseases, old age, and death. It's a wheel. It repeats. So a couple other things I'd like to say to preface it before we get into the details is we don't have anyone here to reincarnate in front of you. So if you want proof of reincarnation in that way, sorry, that's not going to happen. Also, this is not about past life regression. You will not find out who you were in your past lives, nor is it of any value whatsoever. The past is the past. It is done with. Of course, we have been affected by our past experiences, absolutely. But what is the focus is how to disentangle ourselves, how to get off of this wheel of samsara. So the future is far more important than thinking, yes, I was a dancer in the pyramids. I was Cleopatra. I was Mark Antony, right? I bring this up regularly in these talks. My wife and I were sitting at a doctor's surgery many years ago, once. And you have those old magazines there from the 1950s, I never replaced them, right? And we're reading this one, Women's Day, Women's Weekly, New Idea, one of those type of magazines then, 20-odd years ago. And they had this section where they had a psychic section, and people wrote in and asked questions, about different things. And in this one article, in this one old magazine, I can't remember exactly who, but different people wrote in inquiring about who they were. And you'll be astonished to know that in little old Australia, in Moonee Ponds in Sydney and in Parramatta, Cleopatra was reborn, was reincarnated into Parramatta as just your ordinary Aussie housewife. Now, I have this on good authority from the New Idea and the psychic who was writing into that, was answering people's questions. So this is all nonsense. This is all a complete waste of time and of no value whatsoever, and does not help anyone. Have I offended anyone yet? So let us move on. So as we were saying, that reincarnation refers to someone who is reincarnating. So who is that someone that is reincarnating from one body to the next? Who is reincarnating? So this is the foundation of understanding who we are. So generally in life, most of us identify with the body that we are walking around in. We think, this is me. I am this. And if you ask someone, who are you? They'll answer with the different identities that are in connection with this body which we are walking around in. I'm a man. I'm a woman. I'm an Australian. I'm Irish. I'm Indian. I'm Chinese. This is who I am. I am 35 years old. I'm an accountant. I am married. I'm a husband. I'm a wife, etc., etc. So this is how most of us identify ourselves with the identities which are in connection with this body. So are we really our body? This is the question, the first thing we want to look at. Is that who we are? So we can very easily understand, in the most simple and easiest way, is to hear the reality of our identity from the self-realized spiritual teachers who explain very clearly that we are not our bodies. The meditation in yoga is aham brahmasmi. Aham brahmasmi. I am spirit. I am not the temporary body which I'm walking around in. I'm not the ever-changing mind which is full of desires and plans, etc. I am the eternal spiritual person who is only temporarily in this body. And there's some very nice quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, which we will get to, where it explains very clearly how for the living being there is never birth nor death. For the living being is eternal and ever existing. That when the body dies, the self, the person, you, who you actually are, do not cease to exist. And that for the living being there is never birth nor death. So death and birth have nothing to do with you, the self, the person who is walking around in the material body. But before we get to that clearly, we can actually come to understand this reality of ourselves being different from our body through logic, introspective, reason, considering. So the first thing I'd like to ask you, by a show of hands, who here is aware that you exist right now? Anyone here not aware that you exist? That's good. Okay, as I look around the room, I should get a full show of hands on this one as well. Who here is aware that they existed 5 years ago? Who here is aware you existed 10 years ago? Who here is aware that you existed 80 years ago? You should have all said yes, but we'll get to that. Okay, so you're aware that you exist today. You're aware that you existed 5 years ago. You're aware that you existed 10 years ago at least. Remember this and your answer to it, because it is very important to help explain, understand the reality of how we are not our bodies and the nature of transmigration of the self from one body to another, or reincarnation. Maybe I'll also add this. Maybe you can ask a couple of people to share what your earliest experience, your memory is in this life. Your earliest recollection of something that happened to you, that you personally remember, not something your parents told you about, but what you remember. And maybe if you can share what it was and approximately how old you were. Ask two people. Anyone want to share that? Nobody. Yes, sir.
I was 4 when my parents moved to a new town, and it's my earliest memory I have. Is this working?
Is it turned on? I can't hear it.
Hello? Working?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was 4 years old. My parents moved to a new town. They had driven across the country and parked the car in front of the new house. And I woke up in the back seat, had peed my pants, and the neighbor's girl was looking at me from behind the window and smiling at me.
Okay, so was that like, how many years ago approximately was that?
50 years.
50 years ago. Sweet. One other person? So this is, you happened to you were there, weren't you?
I believe I was there.
Yes, okay. Anyone else got one idea to share? Yep, this lady over here.
I remember I think I was about 4.
Just so we're recording this, if that's okay. So.
I think I was about 4 or 5, and I was in a pedal car.
Okay.
And my tooth fell out.
Fair enough. Okay, so again, that was like 10 or 15 years ago, something like that. Okay, so mine was, I can tell you exactly how long ago, to the day. I can even give you the date that it happened. It happened on the 23rd of March, 1957. Can't tell you what day it was, but I can tell you that's the date. How do I know that? It was my 3rd birthday. That's how I know. And my parents had gave me this toy. It was a wooden dog that had wheels on it. And you would pull the cord, the string. And when you pull the string, the head would nod and the tail would move. Right? No batteries required. Just pulling it in front of you. Behind you. And I thought this was pretty cool. And then my evil older sister came and grabbed the string and started running around with it and teasing me because she's 2 years older, so she was 5. And I'm chasing her, bummed that she'd done that. very clearly experience this reality. I could even see the image of the dog. So that was 50, how much did I say that was? 53 years ago, 57 years ago. No, 60. 65 years ago. Now, what's this got to do with anything? I was there. It happened to me. That's why I remember it as something that happened to me. You were there. You remember it. It happened to you. You were there. It happened to you. The body which you have today is not the same body which you had 50 years ago, or the same body which I had 60-odd years ago. It is completely different. A completely different body. You existed then, and you exist now. The body which you had then does not exist anymore. This body is not the same body, simply stretched. It's a completely different body, 100% different body. So I want to read something and then touch on the significance of this, what I've just been talking about now. Dr. Paul C. Abbottsold of the Oak Ridge Atomic Research Center has reported that his radiotopic tracings of the numerous chemicals continuously entering and leaving the body have convinced him that about 98% of all the atoms in the average human are replaced annually. 98% of the atoms in the human body are replaced every 12 months. Bones are quite dynamic, he declared. Their crystals continuously dissolving and reforming. The stomach's lining replaces itself every 5 days. Skin wear and tear is completely retreaded in about a month. You get a new liver every 6 weeks. Donald Hatch Andrews, professor of chemistry at Johns Hopkins University, who has given the matter long consideration, put it at about 5 years, after which one can presumably consider one's physical body completely new down to the very last atom. Paul Weiss writes this about the rapid change of the molecular particles that make up the brain cells. Recent studies of the turnover of the molecular population within a given nerve or brain cell have indicated that although the cells themselves retain their individuality, their macromolecular contingent is renewed about 10,000 times in a lifetime. In other words, the matter making up each cell is completely renewed every 3 days. Practically, you get a new brain every 3 days. So the brain, what's today? Today's Saturday. The brain you had on Wednesday was a different brain than the brain you have today on Saturday. So to get to the significance of this, the body which you have today is different than the body you had 3 to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 65 years ago. I existed then, and I exist now. The body which I had then does not exist. It's a different body than the body which I have today. Although there is the constant principle, the reality of my existence. So it's not the body that is constant, but awareness of my existence is constant. Consciousness, awareness of my existence. Is that understandable? So this also is now alluding to, showing actually quite clearly, that we have already reincarnated in this life. When we understand the definition of reincarnation, means that I, the self, am in a particular body. I leave that body and I now live in a different body. Is that understandable? So it's not a matter of belief in reincarnation. We have already reincarnated in this so-called one lifetime. Doesn't require any religious faith, dogma, nothing. So who is that self, that awareness, that is you, the non-material person? So we also want to touch on this idea that some people then say, well, It's the memory that's constant, right? There is the memory of this that happens, when I was 3 years old, etc. Of course, this is true. But who is remembering? It is you, the self. So you, the self, are the viewer of the mind, right? Earlier on we did the silent witness meditation, where you're stepping back. I am the viewer of the content of my mind. The mind's view is constant. I am the viewer, the watcher, the aware witness of the constant thoughts which move through the mind. So you, the self, are the viewer of the mind. I changed my mind. My mind is driving me crazy. Who's the I? It's not the mind, because the mind is yours. Something that's constantly changing. Something which is driving you crazy. So we are not the physical body, and we are not the ever-changing mind either. We are the self. So so this connects up with as we go forward, in the terminologies I'll be using, this external physical body is described as the gross physical body. Gross meaning heavy. The mind is described as the subtle material body. So we, the self, are covered by these layers of material forms. The gross physical body, which we all see with our eyes, and this subtle body, which is the mind. So the self is neither the physical body nor the mind. We're actually encased in both the gross and subtle material bodies. So I'm not my body and I'm not my mind. And as we experience in mindfulness, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my plans, I'm not my desires, I'm also not my fears. So who are you? Who are we? Who am I? You are the atma, the eternal self. There are two distinct energies. There is matter, which is not conscious. So the difference between matter and spiritual energy is matter, there is no consciousness present. This microphone stand is not a conscious, aware, living being. It is inert matter. There is a conscious living being within this form, me, the self. So it's easy to tell the difference between matter when no self is present and matter when there is a self present. Is that understandable? Has anyone here ever been with someone who has died? Have you been with them as they died? Yeah. Now that might just be your cat or your dog. I didn't say human, right? So most of us can probably put our hand up and say, yeah, a cat, dog, and if it, maybe a cockroach, when you stepped on it, it was alive, then it's not alive. And it's very easy to understand the difference between the body when the person is present and the body when the person is no longer present. Yeah? Easy, easy, easy peasy. No doubt whatsoever. At one moment, don't leave me, don't die, don't leave me. Then they leave. And that's when we cry and break down and experience the pain and suffering of the person who is, don't they even say they've passed on, they've left, but the body's still here. The head is still there, the arms are still there, the legs are still there, the brain is still there. But every single person, from the youngest to the oldest, understands the distinction between the body when the person is in it and the body when the person has left. Everybody, from the Richard Dawkins to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and everybody in between, understands the distinction between the body when the person is in it and the body when the person is no longer in it. And that is what death means. It means the self, the person, has left the body. Ain't no one home anymore. So, again, reading from this yoga text, the Bhagavad Gita, it says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, Krishna is saying this in the Bhagavad Gita, altogether these 8 comprise my separated material energies. Beyond this inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mine, the living beings who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. So we are of the superior spiritual nature, different from earth, water, fire, air, ether, which is the inferior material nature. So your gross and subtle bodies are made of material energy, but your essence is spirit. And the spiritual energy, you, the self, is superior to the material energy. So every particle or spark of spiritual energy is a living, aware, active, purposeful self or person. The individual spark of the Supreme Soul is eternal. So this is because its very essence is life itself. The self's essence does not end. Life means life. So, quoting from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita also, the self or spirit soul can never be cut into pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. The individual self is unbreakable and insoluble, and can be neither burned nor dried. So although these things can happen to the material physical body, in other words, you can kill the body, these do not touch the self. Weapons cannot kill the living being. Fire cannot burn the living being to death. The living being cannot drown, because the living being is not material. We are of that superior spiritual energy. So the body dies, but you do not die. The body is temporary, but you are eternal. Understanding this truth is the beginning of self-realization and the beginning of understanding the reality of reincarnation. Krishna goes on to say in the Bhagavad Gita, know that that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable self. Only the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is subject to destruction. For the self, there is never birth nor death, nor does the self ever cease to exist. The self or spirit soul is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying, and primeval. The self is not slain when the body is slain. And then he goes on to explain this. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the self accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So whether this body, which is compared here to clothes which we are wearing, and as we all know, eventually the clothes we wear out, right? So we take them off and we put on a new suit of clothes. Easy to understand. So similarly, these bodies are clothes which we are wearing. And in the same way as these clothes are of a variety of different colours and textures, they're manufactured in different countries, right? Different prices, different sizes. We don't freak out if you come home one day and your significant other or a friend or a child or a parent and you walk into the lounge room and their clothes are lying on the floor. Do you start weeping and moaning and gnashing of teeth when you see the clothes lying on the floor? Yes. Yes, so does my wife. But you know that they've simply are lazy bums and they didn't pick them up. But that's a different thing. You don't think, and then the person has taken those work clothes off and put on some comfortable clothes. You don't think, where is my husband? Where is my wife? Where is my child? You just know they've changed clothes. Yeah? So similarly, death means that we take this particular clothes off. And in the same way as it's very easy to put on new clothes, the living being puts on another suit of clothes. How and why that happens, we will get to. So just to reinforce this idea, when I was asking the questions about, did you exist 5 years ago? Did you exist 10 years ago, etc.? So I just want to reinforce this a little bit more. In the Bhagavad Gita, again, Krishna says, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the self similarly passes into another body at death. So again, just consider this in connection with the idea of the body always changing, but the self, awareness, remains the same. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the self similarly passes into another body at death. And then Krishna goes on to say, the self-realized soul is not bewildered by this change. Whereas most people are bewildered by death, not even knowing what it is or what's happening to the person. But someone who is situated in self-realization, on the platform of self-realization, understands exactly what is happening. So the self, is continually transmigrating from one body to another. So again, the self was already transmigrated from the baby body to the youthful body, to the adult body, to the middle-aged body, to the old body. So this continuum continues. Similarly, when this body becomes no longer habitable, that same self continues to exist and takes on another suit of clothes. So it's not a great leap of faith, it's actually a continuum of that which is already happening, which has happened many times according to how long we have been in this particular life. So before I continue into some more of the details of how and why this happens, and ultimately how to transcend this reality, are there any questions on these ideas? Not on other ideas. We'll get to them. On these ideas of the nature of the self being different from the body, the difference between a body when a person is in it and a body when the person has left that, and the ever-changing nature of the mind, the body, and the permanent existence of the self. Now, we can use whatever term we want to refer to that person who is different from the ever-changing body. It doesn't matter what word we use, because we made the distinction between matter, which is not conscious or aware or purposeful, and life, to use that word, which is purposeful, alive, willing, living, active. The active principle is the self. The non-material, spiritual, whatever word you want to use, is the self. And we are that active principle, the self, the non-material spark of life who is within the body.
Question regarding when you are talking how our body or cells from atoms, basically green atoms, they are regenerating our organs. But the liver of 25-year-old, it's never the same as 55. If you dissect the liver,
Yes.
it's never the same.
Yes.
So,
Well, neither is the face of a 68-year-old compared to this face when it was 18, unless I go like that, it's...
yeah, I know, but if we are regenerating our organs, why they are not saying...
Yeah, so the question for those who can't hear is, if you do a biopsy on a liver of a 75-year-old compared to a 20-year-old, it's degenerated, all the cells are, and that goes for every single cell in our whole body. The truth is I can't adequately answer that because I'm not a biologist or biochemist or physician or whatever. But what I'm saying here is not debatable. The cell, like through the process of metabolism, we bring in air and water and food and, the body breaks it down. It's an amazing process. And then, the nutrients from each of that system then gets distributed through the whole body, and the waste of the cells is removed through our breath, through our hair, through our stool, our urine, our skin, right? So we know this is actually the case. But the only answer the brief answer I can give you is, which I've heard before from my spiritual teacher in harmony with the yoga text, it's due to the influence of time. It is the influence of time upon the material energy, which is built into every cell, so to speak, or every atom. So due to the influence of time, the power of time upon the matter. See, time has no influence on the self. As we said, for the self there is never birth nor death. So it means time has no influence on you, on me. But time, because it's a material element, has an impact upon that which is material. Houses break down, cars rust, etc. So, but for the self, there is no change.
Is the self just, which causes that, is that just humans, or is that, and
The question is the self just to do with humans, or is it animals also? Life is life. Life is not an offspring of a collection of RNA, DNA, proteins, or any kind of material combination. No matter does not bring about life. Life is a separate and complete and different energy. Not the best word to use, but that's in English it's the word we have. So wherever there are the symptoms of life, it means there is an atma or self present. Plants. Within the body of a plant, I mean, again, can any of us tell the difference between a plastic office plant and an actual office plant? What's the difference? One is living, it's growing, etc., etc. Has anyone here ever had a pet other than a rock? A pet rock. Right? Most of us have had pets. Now, when you look into the eyes of your dog, is someone looking back at you? How you doing? Good to see you. And it's jumping up and licking you. There's someone that you're relating to. There's someone that you care for and who cares for you. That someone is an atma, a self, part of the Supreme Soul also. Non-different than you or I. But in this particular situation, the consciousness of that living being is not as uncovered or as awake as those who are in a human form. Completely equal to and the same as you or I, yes. That's why when, if one of our pets dies, we cry. I remember my dad, who was an atheist, we were brought up on cattle and sheep properties, and we had, kelpies and, work dogs and things. They were never allowed in the house. They were work dogs. But when we moved to the city, for some reason my parents always got cats. They became cat people, right? And we had so many cats when I was growing up. And I remember this one cat we'd had for a very long time. I can't remember. It was probably about 3,000 in cat years, but it was around for a long time. Anyway, as my parents retired, and this one day, I wasn't living at home at this time, but I was a visit and stuff. Anyway, one day my parents came home from doing some shopping, and they had one of those garages with a remote thing, and it was kind of around twilight. My dad had cancer and was a bit aged by then, and eyesight wasn't so good, and reflexes not so good. And so he drives into the garage, and he ran over the cat. Squished. They'd had it for so long, probably longer than they had me. No, it wasn't that. But what was debatable, whether they loved that cat more than they loved us. They loved that cat very much. So when that was discovered and the cat was dead, my parents went upstairs and sat in the lounge chair and didn't talk or move for about 6 hours. They were so devastated. They were so attached to and loving that person in that cat body. If it's just a combination of chemicals, what the hell? It's no big deal. So everybody, even intuitively, knows there's someone in there. And they say, dog is man's best friend. Anyway, so does that answer your question a little bit? I mean, I could go more in depth, but just to answer that in a simple way, yes. There is wherever there is the symptoms of life, there is a living being present. Maybe I'll touch on this a little bit because it's important. Usually, most people refer to my soul, right? Her soul, right? Her spirit or her soul, right? We've used those terms. This is not true. Nobody has a spirit and nobody has a soul. Ever, never, not true. You do not have a spirit and you do not have a soul. You are the soul. You are the spirit. You are the self. Because if I have a soul, who am I? Like I have a guitar. This is my guitar. It's not me, it's mine. So if you say her soul, It's something which she possesses. Well, who is she then if she has a soul? And what is this thing called a soul? No. You are the soul and you have a body. There's a big difference between these two ideas. That's where in yoga the term isn't soul or spirit, it is atma. The Sanskrit term atma means the true self. That's it. The true self, the real self. You, who you actually are. So you don't have a spirit. You do not have a soul. You are the self who is spiritual by nature. Vital that we understand this difference. Because it is you who transmigrates from one body to another, not your soul. Yeah? Is that okay? So again, before we go any further, is there any other questions on this kind of idea?
Can I ask something? Okay, so are you saying it's like automatic, like you're just transferring into a soul straight away, or would you say there's some like, is there?
That's for later.
Okay.
I'm talking about what we spoke about earlier, establishing the idea of the self being different from the body, and how we have already transmigrated or reincarnated within this one lifetime, from the boyhood, girlhood, to the youth, to the middle age, to the old age. These ideas, I wanted to make sure that to clarify any questions on this idea.
This speaks to the, it's probably a bit out of left field, but this speaks to the earthly realm. Has the spiritual teachings through the centuries ever made a reference to an concept of an atma in a cosmic sense, or is that a little bit too...
Depends what you mean by cosmic.
The reality of the universe as we...
The material universe?
Yeah.
Well, it's described again in the yogic text that there are innumerable, uncountable living beings throughout all of the universes. Not universal, multiverses, right? So this is like one small dust particle in the totality of the cosmic reality, of which there are many universes, unlimited universes, which are more and more being discovered by material science, but was always understood in the Vedic or yogic text. And that the living beings, the self, are throughout all of these universes in a variety of different ways and situations. Yes. So not just human on this one planet, there are unlimited living beings in this material cosmic manifestation. So how are we doing? Is it okay so far? So the time is that 3:30? Is that what we got? Do we want to have a break? Let's have a break, and then we'll get further into why a person reincarnates and all that kind of stuff. Toilets are through here. First in, best dressed. There's 2.